of the Burnet Institute. He joins us from Melbourne. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So just, I guess, firstly, let's get your opinion on the decision itself last night to issue that advice about AstraZeneca for people under 50.
Well, the one thing Australia has is very good regulatory authority, several of them, and the second good thing is the government really listens to them. And so this is a really considered opinion for Australia, based on a very rare but real complication, it looks like. And in a circumstance like Australia, where we don't have any COVID in the community at all, the risk-benefit analysis comes out that way. So it's disappointing. I know that it will, most likely engender additional vaccine hesitancy, and I hope that doesn't last long, because this is still a very good vaccine, important part of our arsenal and of the world's arsenal to combat COVID. So that's where we're at the moment.
And so why didn't something like this come out in the trials for AstraZeneca, or is that just a factor of the speed with which we were working?
No, it's got nothing to do with the speed. It's got to do with the numbers. So the numbers of people in a clinical trial are in the tens of thousands, maybe a few more than tens of thousands, and something very rare doesn't reveal itself in those numbers. So it's not until post-release, as we call it, trials, where something is approved as safe, that you end up in the millions. And that's what's happened here. When there's been 10 or 20 million people immunised with the AstraZeneca vaccine, these very rare, literally 1, 2, 3 or 4 in a million cases has popped up and can reveal themselves. And so this is not an unusual circumstance at all. What's unusual is to watch this happening in real time in the public eye. Medical interventions, vaccines, drugs often have very rare side effects that reveal themselves in this way, just not so publicly. So it's really unfortunate that it's happened, but I expect more of these things to happen over the year with different products, not necessarily just AstraZeneca. I expect advice to change for various reasons as our own circumstance in Australia changes, such as we get an incursion of COVID, for example. So this is pretty normal, but I understand the concern it's causing so many people.
One of the other messages the Prime Minister had was that this is not a ban on taking AstraZeneca if you're under 50. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said she is 50, she's had 1 dose of AstraZeneca, completely comfortable getting the second dose. So if you're out there and you're 35, you're 45, you're 28, should you have AstraZeneca?
Well, I would. I'm due to have it on Monday. I'm 54, and certainly it doesn't change my inclination to go and get the vaccine. As I say, it's a very good and very safe vaccine. This advice is out of an abundance of caution. The reason why it's not a ban is that there's every chance it will change as we learn more about the vaccine and as our circumstance in Australia changes. If you're in Great Britain, the age is under 30. Not under 50 as it is here, and that's because people between 30 and 50 have a much higher risk of being infected in Great Britain than they do in Australia. So I do expect advice to change. I personally will be getting it. I'm in an over 50 bracket, so you have to ask people under 50. We're talking about a 1 in a million very severe, potentially life-threatening circumstance. And you don't want to be that 1 in a million, but the benefit, obviously, of being vaccinated, especially when there's lots of COVID around, is much, much higher than that. So, yes, I'd be going and getting vaccinated and be encouraging people to not hesitate for a moment to do so if they get offered.
So the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Paul Kelly, ran through a list of other things that were very interesting questions we still need answers for. Like, how do these variants react to the vaccine? The UK variant, the South African variant, does the vaccine work on them?
Well, I think what Paul Kelly has hit on then is what I consider to be the most important problem. We have a lot of focus on our vaccine rollout, but the bigger problem is the emergence of variants that threaten all vaccines, not just the AstraZeneca vaccine, but all of the vaccines. And the reason why we're getting variants emerging is we have so much COVID in the world. COVID's getting worse in the world, not better. It's getting back to levels around 500,000 500 million cases every day at the moment. So it's happening very, very rapidly. 500,000 cases a day happening at the moment. So extraordinarily high numbers, and that drives the emergence of the variants. So the biggest risk we have in Australia is to our vaccine program are these variants, as Paul Kelly said. So AstraZeneca possibly doesn't work quite as well against the variants as Pfizer and other vaccines, but it's still effective. Especially if taken at the right dosing intervals. But variants will continue to emerge, and there'll be more and more. They'll be better and better at escaping immunity. So the best thing we can do in Australia is help other countries in our region, starting with Papua New Guinea, at getting virus numbers down so variants don't emerge so readily, or else our vaccine program won't work no matter how fast people are vaccinated.
So, Professor Brendan Crabb, you're an infectious diseases expert. So could we be in a situation where we're getting annual COVID shots like we get annual flu shots?
Yes, we could be, whether it's annual or biannual, but periodic. I think that's very likely to settle into that way of things. The coronavirus is not as variable as an influenza virus for various reasons, but we have learned that it is variable. Every virus is susceptible to evolution, and really the folly, I guess, of letting the virus run in so many countries in the world has meant we've got a much higher frequency of these variants of concern, ones that transmit more readily and ones that escape immunity more readily than they otherwise would have if the numbers had been kept low. So unfortunately, we're in that situation, and we need to get the numbers down. It's a straight numbers game. But yes, I think it's likely we will get boosted every year or 2 or 3 with probably a new vaccine that covers the new variants.
And Professor Brendan Crabb, just before you go, we're just reporting in breaking news that the Torres Cape vaccination rollout has been paused while Health Service works through the details of the new recommendations. They say are under 50 and they're, of course, taking the AstraZeneca. Do you think that's an overreaction then?
No, I think pausing is sensible and just taking stock of what the announcement is. And you know, there's a large part of bringing the community up to speed with what's happened. You know, I think that the worst part of these announcements is that people who don't live and breathe this every day like I do get understandably really concerned about it. So no, I think pausing, communicating, people then understanding the risks, and I think once people do really understand the circumstance, then things can restart again. It is, as I say, a very safe and effective vaccine, but not everyone knows that. They see the headlines, they get fearful of them, and the worst thing would be to push through without taking the community with you. So I think it's quite sensible.
All right, Professor, we really appreciate your time and your knowledge. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
That's Professor Brendan Crabb, the Director and CEO of the Burnet Institute.